All right. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to today's virtual tour of the Roundabout Theatre Company Archives hosted by the American Theatre Archive Project. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Eric Kaleri and I serve on the steering committee of the American Theatre Archive Project. If you're new to ATAP, we're a network of archivists, dramaturgs, scholars, and artists dedicated to preserving the legacy of American theater. Since 2009, we've assisted artists and theater companies in organizing their archives and ensuring their records are preserved for the future. We offer a free manual on archiving theater on our website, host regular workshops online and in person, and we offer virtual consultations with archivists to answer questions and to help plan for the future. I'll put the link to our website in the chat window in just a moment, but before we begin, I just want to thank the American Society for Theater Research and our donors for their support of the American Theater Archives Project. You all help make the resources and programs like this possible. Today's program is being recorded and will be available on our website. We ask that you keep your video and microphones muted during the presentation, and we greatly welcome any questions and comments you have in the chat window. And it's my great pleasure and privilege to introduce Tiffany Nixon. Tiffany has served as the archivist for the legendary Tony Award-winning Roundabout Theatre Company for over 13 years. Her focus lies in documenting the processes of live theater so that future generations of scholars and practitioners can contextualize the work through open access to the archive. She's a board member of SIBMUS, the International Association of Libraries, Museums, Archives, and Documentation Centers of Performing Arts, and is an adjunct faculty member at NYU Tisch Production and Design Studio, where she teaches a research resources course to emerging theater designers. Tiffany, thanks so much for offering this tour for us today. I'm going to pass it over to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Eric. And I just have to tell everyone, I have a cold and I'm going to try and keep my voice, but it may go in and out over this time, so bear with me. I'm going to frame all of this from an ATAP's angle, because I think that if we have people in this room that are interested in hearing about how these theater companies approach starting archives and the kind of work that they do over the years to build these archives, I think that this is a great representation of that work. In the early years, and I see Susan Brady and some others in the chat in the room here, we've done a lot of assessments, worked with a lot of different theater companies, trying to find the best practices across different theater companies and to encourage a larger percentage of records being retained. So my ideas about this work have shifted over the years of being here. And the work that I do for Roundabout and beyond has shifted over the years. So for those who don't know about Roundabout started in 1965 as a very off-Broadway company. It was started by a guy by the name of Gene Feist, who was a high school teacher. He was, not a novice to theater. He and his wife, Kathy, were connected to Stella Adler. They were involved in sort of startups of a lot of different theater companies in New York and really wanted to start a theater company. They were living in the Penn South Co-op complex, which, if you know New York, is that complex of co-ops between 23rd and 26-ish, thereabouts. And one day, the story goes, Gene was home from work, where he taught in New Rochelle, taught drama in a high school, and a paper was slipped under the door of their apartment, basically saying, we've got this space underneath the grocery store that was connected to this co-op. Whoever comes up with the best use of this space can use it. So Gene and his wife, Kathy, thought, well, we should start a theater company. Let's do this. So they sent out a call to all of their friends to donate small amounts of money to get this company up and running. Very quickly, they amassed, several thousands of dollars to get this going, and were chosen to use the space. So that started Roundabout, this, the lore of the basement theater. I mean, the reality is that all of these companies in the 50s and 60s in New York were starting in basement theater, spaces. It's not unique to Roundabout. If you think of Cappuccino and you think of all of the other companies at that time, they were carving out little spaces wherever they could and staging theater as best they could. So that's how Roundabout started, in this basement theater. And Jean Feist, very early on, as a drama teacher in a high school, was very interested in seeing classic works that had really never, that he wasn't able to see on the stage. He would only read and never seen stage. So he was really interested in doing classics revivals. In the early years, Roundabout was a repertory company. For about the first 10 years, they were in rep, and so they were always doing 2 shows at one time. And it was very much an educationally driven organization. They really wanted to do outreach and do student matinees and to do a lot of work with students. And in truth, many of the actors who were in those early shows were high school teachers that were colleagues of Gene's at his high school. So it was very much a community-based company in those early years. But it struck a chord, and it really was speaking to the Chelsea neighborhood where they were located originally. They very quickly got a lot of subscribers. You know, they wanted to have this subscription model, and very quickly needed to have additional spaces. We had within 10 years had a second space. So they were operating a main stage and a second stage. And over the years, as the company grew and its reputation grew, it moved throughout. It moved to Union Square. It moved in, some different areas before it finally moved up to Broadway in the early 90s. So that I think people think of Roundabout as this very large not-for-profit theater. In today's world, Roundabout operates 4 theaters, 5 stages. We do very, very big, robust musicals. We have rental houses. There's a lot of work that is done in our education efforts. We have this very, very large education program and underground works. There's a lot of things happening in Roundabout, but it did really start as this very small community-based theater company. And I think some parts of that still remain in the core and the fabric of the company. So how the archives started, and after I do my spiel, we'll walk around. Roundabout was approaching its 50th anniversary. In the mid 2000s, it decided that it really didn't know what it had in terms of stage documentation, milestone celebration documentation, moving image, photographs. And at that point, we had someone in our development department who was married to an archivist, and she thought, we should really go after a grant to identify materials to start to build out this collection so that we can celebrate the 50th anniversary in a very meaningful way. So they went after a grant from the Leon Levy Foundation, and I think many of you probably know of them. They're very instrumental in funding a lot of archival initiatives in New York and beyond, not just in performing arts, but in fine arts and humanities. And they gave the seed money to start a preliminary assessment of the collections. They weren't in one place. They were in offices, in people's homes, in the different theaters. They were kind of all over the place. So I was hired as the first and only archivist. I was hired for 3 years to identify materials that could be used to celebrate the 50th anniversary that was going to take place in 2014. And the bulk of my work was really that focus, was really trying to figure out the chronology of the shows. What kind of photography did we have? Could we use it? In the early years, we almost exclusively worked with Martha Swope, which I'm sure many of you know was a very, very famous performing arts photographer. So I had to reach out to her to get access to imagery that Roundabout didn't keep. There was a lot of moving image, that some of which we had, some of which we didn't. So it was trying to make assessments on that and digitized content that we had that was in older formats of video. And it was really just kind of bolstering the company with this nice assortment of assets that could be used for the 50th anniversary. During that time, it became pretty clear that Roundabout was going to restage one of its, very iconic productions of Cabaret. And I was being contacted during that initial time to find out what did we have connected to Cabaret, what kind of stage documentation still existed. And because it was a show that ran for so long, it was actually very well documented. And because I could very quickly and easily produce material for them to review to see if that was actually a show that they were going to be able to reproduce, I think that my place at Roundabout was solidified because I could show very easily that by arranging and describing and cataloging this content, I could very quickly find it, turn it over, and show them what we had done in past productions. So at that point, I really started to think about how contextualized these records can and should be, and really started to make efforts to go after a larger percentage of records, and not only records that are, the physical records of production, but the records of costumes and moving image and properties and the orchestrations and everything that goes into bringing a show to life. And there's a lot of negotiation that happened in those early years as an outsider coming into the company to really try and describe and explain the value of keeping these records, when I think many of you know, many theater companies really don't place effort on keeping the stage documentation. They're thinking about shows into the future, 5 years into the future and beyond. They're really not as interested in keeping the records of shows that have already closed. So for me, I'm living in all of those worlds of thinking about shows that are happening in the future, thinking about the shows that have already happened, and figuring out how to provide access to all of that content. It's massive. So for in pre-pandemic years, Roundabout was doing at least 7 shows a season, and then all of the educational work that is happening. So those productions, all of the institutional records that are being produced, all of the records retention that happens through the archives. It is a lot of content to think about and to describe and process, so that not only I can very quickly and effortlessly turn it over to whoever needs it in the company, but that I can show that a theater company hiring an archivist who dedicates all, a full-time job to this work, you can amass these incredible collections and have it be a really important resource for practitioners if they know that the collection exists and will come and use it. So it's really, I have been here now about 14 years. I think I'm always asked, why have I stayed as long as I have? It's an incredible collection. It is, I wouldn't have the institutional knowledge that I have if I had left earlier. And luckily, Roundabout has committed to this project over time. So it's really, at this point, it's an incredible resource. So I want to get up and walk around and show what the space looks like. I do want to give to kind of paint the picture of that the archives were not always in this amazing showroom space in Midtown. I'm in the same building where the administrative offices are, but I'm in a lower suite. For the first 10 years of my work here, I was in the basement of this building, and everything that you might imagine about being in a basement happened. Major water damage. They were doing renovations to an upper floor, and the ceiling came in at one point. Over the years, it just became completely unsustainable to be in that space. So at a critical juncture, Roundabout decided, okay, if we're going to actually do this and have people come into the space and really have it mean something, we need to move it up and out of the basement, and they did. So for about the last 4 or 5 years, I have been in this space. So I want to start and walk around here, and can you see and hear me? Can someone give me a thumbs up or something on that?
We can't see. Let me see.
You
Oh,
can't
actually,
see.
yes, we can. Sorry about that. Yes, we can. And we can hear you.
And you can hear me. Great. So some of you have been in this space. I know that Suzanne Lipkin and others are in the room. So this is actually some of the content. Wait, let's see here. What does Melissa say? Can you not see the video?
We can see it, yes.
Okay, great. I thought something was coming from Melissa. So a lot of the content that is in this space is props, significant props that have come from shows where I tend to see a show and will contact company management and general management, and we will make a list of the kinds of materials that should come from the show. If it's a rental, like I know when we go into the other space with Caroline or Change, some of that content I know we're not going to be able to keep, and I have to just accept that. So did something just weird happen? Is that, oh, now it's echoing really badly, but I hope you guys can still see it.
Can you mute your computer?
Oh, well, it looked like someone just unmuted. Is that better?
Can you mute the volume on your computer?
How's that?
Oh, much better. Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Sorry, I should have planned this better. So what you're seeing are pieces, I'm sorry about that. Sorry, Kylie, that are from shows. So the hanging mobile is actually, those were the cherry trees from our most recent version of the cherry orchard. And the whole ceiling was covered in those. And usually they're throwing this stuff away. And so I will show up when they're doing the strikes, and I will start to pull the content that I think that we should keep for the archives. Victor Garber, his husband, actually painted that. That was from Present Laughter. It's actually very large. You can see the scale of it. It was massive. It was hanging in his over his fireplace in that show, which was super funny. And different Alan Cumming from Three Penny Opera that was used in the show. This is actually a fan painted this dead ringer show art of Brian Bedford and the importance of being earnest. Brian had that in his dressing room during the run of the show, and then it was given to the archives, and the letter is on the back with the fans' correspondence. And then, you know, different Susan Hilferty, different renderings and things that come forward. I have a incredible flatbed scanner. It actually, well, you can feed blueprints through, and then it stitches it together. So we have the ability to scan very large, oversized plans and elevations. And then a lot of other, this is actually one of the earlier posters that we have. It's 1979, A Month in the Country. That's Tammy Grimes. Boyd Gaines was actually in that production. And if you can see, it's a Paul Davis illustration, and he did all of the early public posters. And so I don't have records in terms of why and how Roundabout got him to do that poster, but we have that poster. We're more known for the sort of the 80s and 90s. We worked with Scott Mccowan,
who you see here. He is a scratchboard illustrator. You probably know him. He did for about 10 years all of the show art for Roundabout. Gorgeous, beautiful show art. And for each show, he would do, 9 or 10 different mock-ups of what the show art might look like. And we have all of that in the archives as well, which I think is really very interesting to, when you think about the why and what of directors and playwrights choosing show art, and the kinds of posters that make it forward and the ones that don't are actually really, really fascinating to me. A little known fact of Roundabout, or maybe some people know about it, but in the 70s and early 80s, Roundabout was actually in bankruptcy. And, we could talk a lot about that time, but Gene Feist, the founder, really was trying to find different ways of engaging the community in our venues, but we didn't have a lot of money to actually get the shows up. So he thought it would be great to rent the space out, and the Dance Umbrella, which was the technical assistance group, their brainchild of getting grants to then find spaces for these dance companies to actually have a season, they connected with Roundabout, and the Dance Umbrella took place at Roundabout for about 5 or 6 years in the late 70s. And you can see the Louis Falco. He had a huge gala celebration that took place in the street on 23rd Street. And it was Andy Warhol did the show art. It was this incredible festival that took place. And Merce Cunningham, Jose Limon, Meredith Monk House, all of those companies danced at Roundabout. And the rumor is that the stage was so perfect for dance that the Joyce was modeled on that space, the Joyce in New York. So you can see all of the different kinds of, I love a good Gertrude Stein salon wall. And so I tend to do that with different content. And Eric, tell me if I'm running out of time.
You're good. We've got
So then this is the entry space here. You walk through the door, and we're in a showroom with a fashion showroom. So I had to, put a film on the door because they didn't want people to be able to see in here, because it's a space where different buyers come in and buy clothes. So I actually had to film the front door so that people can't see inside. But the kinds of things that are in this main space here are these are the vitrine show arts from our 1530 Broadway space. Those were the posters that were out. We did have quite a bit of those original posters. When Roundabout renovated its space a couple of years ago, they decided to get rid of a lot of them. I was able to keep quite a bit of them, and so I put them up in this space here. I have different things that are around. This was one of the blobs from Merrily We Roll Along. This was the Fur Lady. She actually was the one that smoked. And so when she came here, she was actually still smoking. I might have been the last person to smoke her. And these were, this is the kind of, the iconic props from shows that I'm really interested in keeping, if we can find a way to keep them. And when I got to Roundabout, not only was Roundabout really not keeping a lot of the stage documentation, they weren't keeping costumes either, because they really believe that costumes for a company the size of Roundabout, you're not ever going to put them back on stage. They just won't go back on stage. So they were being given to TDF and Helen Uffner and different studios in town. I thought that it was horrible not to keep the costumes. And so I started to go after costumes when I arrived. This was actually one of the costumes that was in our costume stock. This is Eartha Kitt's dress from 9. And there were a couple other pieces from Cabaret and beyond that I was able to salvage from our costume stock and move into the archives. And I do different displays here at every couple of months. I shift them out. And other things that come forward. This is the tree from the last version of All My Sons. You can see it's broken in the back there. This up here is the bird from Kiss Me Kate. I would pull it out, but I can't hold it and operate it at the same time, but you can see it. And this is from our last version of Cabaret, the 2014 Cabaret. I went to the strike and literally begged for this at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and got it. And it lights. It's incredible. I mean, I'm mixing shows. I'm mixing metaphors here because these are from the 20th century musical. And then our original Don't Tell Mama chair. This literally has been in all of the tours, in both productions, and has seen a lot of life. This is, people come in here and sit on it all the time. And I'm just going to quickly kind of go through these because I want to really sort of show you. I've left out this space here. I think some of the people that might be in this space this space used to be our hand props room, and our tech costumes, our rehearsal costumes are still in the back of this space. But I have since taken over this entire space with the costumes that I've been collecting over the last 14 years. There's a second space with those costumes as well. They come in when the show strikes, and I usually it's a full look. So it will be the accessories, if there's hats, shoes, whatever comes forward with it. And I have one of the dressers from one of our theaters actually makes these Tyvek garment bags. And it's a wonderful fabric to use for these garment bags, much better than muslin in my opinion. And they're cataloged, described, and photographed, and then they're put in these bags with everything intact. This is actually an unusual situation here, and I've left it out to show. Carolina Change was a rental. It was, we brought that show over from London. And in those situations, usually everything goes back full hog to the originating theater. In this case, because Carolina Change was meant to stage before the pandemic, it had a long and strange kind of, bumpy road to getting on the stage. By the time the show came and went here in New York, London no longer wanted the costumes back. So we were able to keep all of the costumes from the show. So in this case, all of the radios, and you can see the different radios, and their tags are intact. All of the looks for the radios are here for the main and then the understudy. And this is Sharon's dress. So this hasn't been put away yet because she is up for a Tony, and she may actually wear this dress if she were to perform. So this is being kept out, but everything comes forward. The shoes, everything that goes in with the look will be kept. This is her maid's uniform with the shoes. People always ask about the wigs. The wigs we do not retain because the wigs are actually, it's just a back piece that is usually restructured, for a different character. So the wig makers are keeping their wigs, and we do not keep the wigs. So I'm just going to walk through and show over here. So these are all of the headpieces that go with the radio looks, and they're tagged on the bottom. And these sadly, a bunch of the shoes did not come forward, but the shoes in theory would be included in with the look and would be documented as part of the full look. And you can see the wig book that has come from the UK, and you can see, because it's the middle ring is very much a UK thing, and you can see how the wigs were set by look, by character. So this all comes forward, and then this is a show box for Caroline or Change. The kind, and we could talk about this, but I don't know if these are questions, but I use Collective Access to do the cataloging, and I just assigned basically random series numbers for everything in the collection, because it didn't make as much sense to use an existing, cataloging structure. So for this, it's the year that it's being cataloged, the series, which is Studio 54, and then the number of the show. And then everything that is in support of the show is going to be cataloged using that number. This is only the beginning of the documentation that comes forward. Our general managers keep the show records for 2 full fiscal years before they cycle into the archives. So this is the material that is just coming from the PSMs, the production stage managers. It's the UK prompt scripts. It's some of the different research Bibles. All of this content will then be probably, for a big musical, it will be about 5 boxes in total, and then all of the orchestrations that come with it. So you can see what that is like. In through here are all of the props and different objects that are being retained from the shows. So lovely Tony Walton rendering. Different hats, different objects. We contractually, we don't own the models, but if a sub designer wants to give the model for the archives, we absolutely take them. So this is birthday candles, and the model is inside of this box. We have a lot of models. Here are some of the lingering hand props that are kept here for tech and beyond. And I'll just quickly show you this space here. This is not part of the archives, although Roundabout thinks of it as the archives. These are the costume stock, the rehearsal stock costumes that come, everything comes and goes. Every show strikes out, loads up onto the racks here, and then a team of people from our theaters come in the summers, and they get rid of the content that we're not going to keep, and then they will measure, oak tag, and get all of these back up and running so that we know exactly what we have. And then back through here, these are the production records. So even though it's fairly large for a midtown space, it's about 4,500 square feet. We don't have space to keep all of the records that Roundabout is retaining. We have thousands of records that are offsite. Really, what is here are the production records, because that is what researchers are most interested in. And these are just like what I showed you with Caroline or Change. This is, Sons of the Prophet. These are all arranged. So it's all of, each one is slightly different, because depending on how the stage manager gives me the records is how the records will be arranged. But all of that will be here. And then there's usually going to be, especially for a new work, all of the script versions, script logs, and page note changes. So that is all in here. They're arranged by venue, because Roundabout thinks of itself by venue. So it's the early years, Studio 54, the Pells, and the underground shows, the Stephen Sondheim Theater, which was formerly the Henry Miller's Theater, and then the American Airlines records are here. And I should say now, because I don't think I said it when we started, this collection is really only the Broadway years moving forward. Roundabout purged the early years. When they moved to Broadway, they really thought of themselves as embarking on a new company with a new mission in some ways. And so the records were purged, sadly. And also here are all of the play readings since 1983, when Todd Haynes became the artistic director, and all of the show mock-ups, all of the board records, all of the, didn't show this, the script coverage. So when people are submitting scripts, that is all documented, and we're tracking all of that. And then through here are the more internal reference files. So these are all of the historic contracts from the shows. We digitize them now, but historically they were all paper-based records. They're all here, and a lot of the precedent that is set for actors and what we promise people is set and codified in these records. And then we have the labor negotiations, so all of the union negotiations through the years. Most of that is here, some of it is offsite. And then in every instance with every venue, yes, and Jean Feist's papers are at NYPL. When I first got to Roundabout, Jean had donated the records but hadn't been processed. And so we worked in tandem, and the records that Jean had given that do document the early years of Roundabout were processed, and a finding aid was made available. So some of the early years are actually discoverable through that. Thank you, Suzanne, that's so helpful. And so these are the historic renovations. In some cases, they will be under the watch of the Historic Preservation Trust. In the case of American Airlines, we had to do everything according to that trust. And then all of those records are constantly being added to, because we are constantly renovating and working on those spaces. So it's a very much a growing collection. This section over here, these are the played parts orchestrations. We're lucky to work with a copyist who not only does, prepares the music for the orchestration, but she pulls it all together when the show closes. She creates an inventory and a master chart, and that all comes forward to me. So all of that content will come, and we will have all of the played parts by musical number. And you can see here that they're in their original binders from the pit. And then there's just an extra space. This is all costumes, hundreds and hundreds of costumes from the shows that since I've been here. And literally just, handmade, drawn, painted kimonos. David Wooler did that. It's a beautiful one. This is what Olympia Dukakis wore in Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore. And then a whole wall of models, lots and lots of models, all of the Godot hats. We have the full look for every one of those characters, but these are their hats. And I pulled this out. We have a lot of sort of orphan pieces. So in this case, this was Holiday Inn, and that was a co-production with Universal. They kept all of their costumes, but strangely, they didn't keep some of these Easter bonnet hats. So we got them, and they're wildly amazing. There's lots and lots and lots of this content. So I'm going to walk back over and look at questions. And if you want to talk about anything in particular, we can do that. Okay. So Eric, will you bring me back to PC?
So I think, can you turn on your own video?
Yep. Can you see me?
There we go. Yes. Great, thank you so much. That was amazing, Tiffany. A question that I have, and folks, please do feel free to add your questions and comments down into the chat window. What did the archive look like when you came on board, and how did you get started?
There was no archive. So it was really, it was a lot of boxes of content that were in, as I think anyone who's gone in and looked at theaters records, they were in closets and in people's filing cabinets, and they were all over the place. I literally had this gigantic processing table in the basement where I was pulling records and trying to create a sense of what the ordering would be, because in different departments had their hands on different records. So it was really kind of pulling it all together and assessing what was there and where all the gaps were, because there's massive gaps, and going after a lot of the content that was not kept or was gone for whatever reason, whether it's performance reports or costume designs or whatever. And it's been a long and tedious process getting it to this place. It's a constant, like, not only am I always thinking like, oh, what are we missing? What have I missed? Because I'm a one-person operation doing this with all of this content coming forward. And I know that there's content that is existing in different people's, we work with vendors who are creating a lot of material for us. And did we get that content? And it's really always trying to contextualize these records in a way that the company itself isn't thinking about. So it's always trying to make them aware of how valuable these records are. Like a great, and this isn't a question, but yesterday we're going to do 1776. We've done 1776 in the past. General management contacted me and said, we need to pull all of the performance reports from 1776. Well, they weren't kept. So there, when I say, like, I think I'm always kind of made fun of, because I'm always like, we need to keep all of this content because some researcher or some practitioner is going to want this. They do. And that's why you need to keep it. But many companies don't keep those nuanced records because they don't really understand that they should keep them. They think, oh, we have the playbill and we have a show picture and we've got a couple photographs and that documents the show, without really understanding how little it documents.
We've got a few questions that are coming in.
Yeah.
The first one's from Beth Massa, who's asking about they're just getting started on their archiving journey at their theater.
Yeah.
What skill sets should people, or would you suggest people have that join them? Right now, they're a small group of volunteers with enthusiasm, but little to no experience in this type of work.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's always very helpful if you can work, if you're a group of volunteers, if you can work with some people that have a lot of institutional knowledge in the theater, that they can, you can frame what the chronology, you can frame the way and, the how and what of what happened in the company. And if you can have somebody who's working alongside of you doing that, it will make it so much more meaningful and rich, because the collection will be, it will come together faster than if you were volunteers who really don't know that much about it and are pulling all of those records. I would say that it's really helpful if you can come up with, and I know that ATAP has this, where you can create master checklists of content that you know that the company is interested in keeping. And even if you can't look at what's happened in the past, however long your company's been in business, you can at least determine, okay, we're going to keep these record sets moving forward. And we're going to make sure that every show we do, we are getting the costume renderings and the photographs and everything, so that we are telling the story of this production for researchers, practitioners in the future. I could screen share if you wanted to see what that looks like from the digital side, if that was of interest. But it really is, you should hire an archivist, or you should hire people that can help, or bring in somebody from a local library or university that can maybe give you some framing points, because I really do think it's a lot of work. I can't stress how much work this is, and it takes a long time to pull it together. So you have to kind of have some endurance and perseverance, find people that are going to help you steer that and shape it at the company, and then see it through during different phases of the work. So I don't know if that answers your question.
There's a question from Norma Kramer asking, did you say nothing is reused? That seems like a huge expense that could be avoided. Are the materials in the archive ever reused for future productions?
Well, from the archives, no, they're not used, because if they were to go back into production, they would take on a different life. It's happened where we have had requests to have content pulled from the archives and go back into production. And in the early years, I agreed to do that and learn the lesson of, not only does it take on the, let's use an example of a costume. It will be altered. It will be, the tags will usually be either tagged over or removed entirely for whichever new actress or actor is going to wear that costume. And the life of the textile just disintegrates very quickly if it's going to be constantly put back into rotation. So I don't allow the archival content to go back on stage. If it's orchestrations, or if it's content that is going to be able to be preserved in some kind of way, then yes, we will reuse them. But the idea of pulling aside these objects and memory objects from performance is with the intent to make sure that it moves through time as the memory object from that performance, from that show, and not a whole bunch of different shows. So like when I point to something that, you saw the Cyrano in 2012, and you know that he was wearing that, and you know that that pebble was flicked up there. If it was used in a bunch of different shows, the significance of that archival object shifts. That isn't to say that we don't have entire warehouses of props and things that we reuse over and over and over again. As a not-for-profit, we have to do that. But from the archives, no, those things are not going back onto the stage.
Great. And from Christopher Wolf, thanks for the great tour. Do you have a records retention schedule? And if so, who did you pull in to help develop it?
When I got to Roundabout, there was an in-house council that created the codified records retention schedule that I used and then have adapted to include archival content. We're actually in the process right now. I'm the records manager for Roundabout as well, so I do all sides of that. We're in the process of adapting the records retention to capture all of the born digital content that not only, because of COVID, so much of what happened, we shifted to digital capture of things, but moving forward, it seems like that is going to be the wave. this was the first time where shows didn't come to me in Bibles, like a stage manager Bible didn't show up. It was all mostly on Dropbox, drives, flash drives. So we're working to figure out how to work with IT and the different company managers and people that are involved in getting all of this documentation to make sure that it's being captured and finding ways to save it and preserve it in the digital realm. So we definitely have a records retention schedule, and it's followed to the letter.
And you said that was counsel that helped you. That's the sort of legal counsel for
It was,
Roundabout.
yeah, it was an attorney that was our in-house counsel before I even got here. That document was created. And now our current general manager, he goes by he's a chief administrative officer, but he's also an attorney. So he and I are amending the records retention policy.
Great. And for folks who are interested in records retention policies, it's actually it's a really interesting topic, despite what maybe the name is. If you're not used to this, it could sound perhaps a little weird, but it is really important. And we do offer some examples of that on the American Theater Archive Project website.
It's critical because if you're looking at, and you include materials that fall in the side of the archives and that have, sort of evergreen value, it's really important to get those on a retention schedule, because then you can always use that retention schedule for anybody who's giving you pushback or whatever. It's like, no, this actually is on the retention schedule, and I have the authority to go in and pull those records because they fall into the archives world. So it's really important to have a records retention policy, not only from compliance standpoint, but from archival value standpoint.
And a question from Alejandro Bastian. What are the current challenges of the archive that you're currently facing?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I would say that the digital, a shift to mostly born digital records is a huge challenge. When you're building out these physical archives and you expect a physicality coming from performance, and then to really just look at it from a purely digital perspective, it shifts, especially for theater companies that really aren't thinking as much about preservation of digital content. It is very foreign to these companies to run checksums and to figure out how they're maintaining these massive amounts of data into the future, especially as so many of the companies move to cloud-based storage, and your reliance on outside vendors to maintain that data then changes the game. And so for me, that's a huge challenge of how we're going to move forward and save all of this content that is just growing exponentially every year. But it's also getting, to me personally, the biggest challenge is getting practitioners and people working in theater to understand the value of this work, that it's not just somebody sitting down in an office, like filing things away or hoarding. I was called a hoarder for years. That there's science and intention, and I am really involved, or was at least before the pandemic, in all of the new play development and making sure that there's an embedded archive in that space, so that we're getting all of the notes and decisions made from directors and all of that content that you as a person seeing a play would never know took place. But from a research standpoint, and especially new work, that you're setting the tone of what that play is going to look like in each iteration moving forward, I think it's critical to document all of the steps that were taken by those creative teams. So to me, that messaging out the value of these performance records and how they can be used and why they should be used is something that is really important to me. And it's what's kept me here, because I think that I'm doing really valuable work. But it would be nice if the theater community more broadly, not just academic the academic side of things, that the theater community would really understand just how significant these records are. So that to me is a really real challenge.
And Tiffany, I've put the link there to the Roundabout Archives in the chat window for folks. Who can use the collection, and what's the
Anyone.
best way to come in and to do that?
Anyone. I mean, that I'm different from most libraries and special collection archives. If you have a legitimate reason to access the collection, even if it's like you want to see a show that you didn't get to see and you want to watch the footage, or you want to see all of the production photographs, or whatever your research interest is, all you have to do is contact me. And I will pull the costumes. You will have a very contextualized showing of the performance. You can see all of the performance reports. We keep all of the house reports. You can see everything that was kept, and watch the show and touch the costumes. And if there's a cast album, listen to the music. It's really, to me, it's the next best thing to actually getting to see the show, is to see the behind the scenes, the making of the show. So just reach out. Happy
Wonderful.
to have anyone come.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. And Tiffany's contact information for the archive is there on that website, both a phone number and an email, and the access policy form. So Tiffany, thank you. Thank you so much for taking us on this tour of the Roundabout Archives. And thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone who's been coming in, and for your participation today. We'll hope to see you at future ATAP events.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.